Hello, everybody. So this is our lesson on Russian alphabet. You can use it as just a separate learning tool to learn the alphabet, or you can use it as a supplement to the Russian lessons I've been posting on Instagram and YouTube. So as you can see, it says Natasha's method. And you're probably thinking, well, why should I trust Natasha just because she's Russian? Well, not just because I'm Russian. I do have a bachelor's degree in linguistics. I do speak 4 languages, some better than others. And I do know a lot about other languages, just how they work, and I can read some other alphabets. So this method, although might not be scientific, it is based on quite a bit of experience. I think it's the easiest way to learn the alphabet. So we'll see. Maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't agree, but at least we can try. So I will go from easiest to hardest. So it's going to be, kind of step by step. So don't get too scared. Also, I do want to mention that the pronunciation in Russian, although important, it's not as important as it is in English. So some sounds, if you make it sort of close to it, it's good enough. Also, contrary to popular belief, there really aren't that many strange sounds. A lot of them are very similar to English or the same as in English. So it's really not as bad as you might have heard. Also, there are, as you know, many countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union, and they had to learn Russian, but their native languages were, come from different families. So when they learn Russian, the accents are very different. So Russians in general are very used to many accents of kind of different varieties, so they will understand a lot more than you might think. And even if, let's say, one of your sounds is way off, but then sort of the sounds around it are okay, they will understand you. And Russians are very patient when listening to other speakers, because they know it's sometimes hard to pronounce. So don't be worried. I'm sure you'll do fine. So that would kind of to put you at ease. Also, although letters do look a little strange, not all of them, but some, it's still not characters. It's just a letter. So it's just like English letter. So there's no kind of unusual, representation of it or anything like that. And so there are 33 of them. And I think that is it for the beginning. I do recommend getting a piece of paper and a pen, just so you can write the letters as you learn them. So that way when you get to the next step, you kind of have the previous step written down. Okay, here we go. So we are ready to start. The method is that Russian letters are divided into different categories. So category 1 is the letters that look and sound the same as English letters and actually have the same sound. So here we can see A, K, M, O, T, and the Russian letters look exactly the same, and the sounds they would make would be A, K, M, O, and T. Knowing that, you can actually read the words below. So mama, which means mom, kot, which means cat, tok, which means current, like electrical current, mak, which is poppy, like the flower, kak, which means how, and you might recognize that from the Russian lessons when we learn how to say как дела. That's the same word. The next one is tak, which means so. Again, from the Russian lessons, there was a phrase tak себе, which is so-so. That's the same word. Tam, which means over there. And mat, which means profanity or basically swear words. So just like that, without really doing anything, you know 5 Russian letters. You can recognize them. You know the sounds they make. And because of that, you can actually read Russian words with those letters. Okay, next one. So next category is the Russian letters that look like English letters, but the sounds don't match. What I mean by that is it's very familiar letter, but the sound is unexpected. So, for example, the first letter, it looks like an English B, but it actually makes sound V. And we can see that in the example word below. And I especially chose the words that already have the letters that we learned, except from maybe one. So that way it's easy to read because you already know the rest. So this one is vata, which means cotton. And as you can see, the first letter looks like a B, but it wouldn't be bata. It would be vata. So the next letter looks like an English H, but it actually is it makes a sound N. So the word, the example word is nota, which is note, like a musical note. Next one looks like an English P, but it's actually R, so rot. You can roll it or half roll it, but close enough. Rot means mouth. The next one looks like an English C, but it actually is S, so S, sok, which is juice. Next one looks like an English Y, but actually makes a sound U, like in tool. And the example word is which means intellect. The next one looks like an English X, but it makes a sound similar to H. You might have heard it being a little bit more exaggerated, like but you really don't have to do it. The plain English H will be fine. So the example word is ham, which is rude person. Next one, it's a little bit off, like it's not exactly like an English letter, but it's basically backwards R, and the sound it makes is ya, like in yard. And the example word we have is yama, which means pit, like a hole, not the pit of a fruit. The next one is English E, but it makes sound ye, like in yes. And the example word is tema, which means theme. And the last one also looks like an English E, just with the 2 dots above. And the sound it makes is yo, like in yours or yok. And the example word is lyon, which means linen. And I forgot to mention in the first slide, I made the Russian vowels in the red color and the consonants in the blue color. So that way, there's another way for you to remember the sounds a little bit better, because, obviously the vowel sounds will be different than the consonants. Okay? And I know it is confusing and it seems that you wouldn't remember, but believe me, with practice, it will all make sense. And again, just look at them. It's not that many of them in this category. So you will be fine. And we're ready for the next step. So the next category is the letters that look strange to an English speaker, but have familiar sounds. So this category might look a little bit more complicated because the letters just look so weird, but they really are not, because the sounds they make are very familiar to an English speaker. So here we are. So the first letter makes a sound B. So the example word is bok, which means side. The next letter is g, or makes the sound g, and the example is gnome, which is gnome. Important to mention here, it only makes sound g. It does not make a sound j like the English G does. Next letter is kind of looks like a D, loosely. So it makes sound d, and the example is dom, which means house. The next letter looks pretty much like number 3, and the sound that it makes is z. So the example we have is zond, umbrella. The next one is a vowel. As you can see, it's red. So the sound is E, like a long E. So example is tik, which just means like a twitch. Next one is a little bit tricky because it does look like E, but it just has this little hat up above, and it actually is not a vowel. And the sound that it makes is toy, like at the end of toy. So h is the actual sound. So the example that we have is moj, which means mine. For example, you could say moj zond, meaning my umbrella. Next letter is makes the sound l. So mel is the example that we have, chalk. Next one is just a sound that the English P makes. So pot is our example word, which just means sweat. Next one is kind of a recognizable, I think, because you might have seen it in the Greek fraternities. So the Greek alphabet has a similar letter, and the sound is f. So photo, a photo is the example word for that letter. The next one is ch, and it would be the sound like in a chip. So English sound, but in English there's usually ch that represent that sound. In Russian is just one letter. So example word that we have is chas, which means an hour. Next one is sh. So in English it would be represented with sh, but in Russian it's just one letter. So shock in Russian, or shock in English. That would be the example. And also, as you can see below, I put my name there, Natasha, and you could see that now you can read it easily because you already learned the N, and now you know sha. So Natasha is how you would read that. Next letter is another vowel, and it's a e sound. So emu, which means emu, like the bird, but it's e like in met. And the last one is u, and the example we have is luk, which is a manhole. So the sound would be like u, like in use. And here we are. So this was probably our longest category. But again, as you could see, it's a little bit simpler than you might thought because the sounds are very familiar to the English speaker. All right, and this is our last category, category 4, where the letters look strange but sound even worse. Of course, I'm joking. They don't sound that bad. They're a little bit unfamiliar, but we can at least have examples that will illustrate the sounds. Also, the good news about these is that they are pretty rare, or most of them, so you wouldn't even come across them that often. And also, there's not too many of them. There's just 6 of them. And really, 2 are not even technically letters that make sounds. They affect the word and they affect sounds in the word, but they don't actually have sounds themselves. So let's start. The first one is makes a sound zh, And the example we have is жук, which means bug. And it actually kind of looks like a bug, so if that would make you remember that letter. So жук is bug. So the closest sound in English for that letter would be sound j in pleasure. Pleasure. So жук, pleasure. Next one is it makes sounds ts. So like at the very end of sits, that's the sound that it would make. And the example that we have is цена, which means price. Next one is one of the trickier ones. You might notice that it actually looks like one of the previous ones that made the sound sh, like sh, like in my name. The only difference, it has this little tiny tail. And for English speakers, it's actually very hard to distinguish the two letters, the one with the tail and then one without. The best example I can think of is if you say sheep as opposed to ship. So like ship, that sh is really the other one. The one in sheep is really this sh. So it's sh versus sh. And I get it. It's very little difference, but it's there. So the example is щека, which means cheek. Again, the good news is this is a pretty rare letter, and if you do say sh instead of sh, it's very close enough. So if you say щека, it's close enough. Everybody would understand what you mean. So that's good news. So next one is one of those that doesn't actually make a sound. What it does is it sort of makes like a pause between the two letters, and it's called hard sign. So it's a bit hard to explain, but an example that I have is съем, which means I will eat something. So as you could see, we already know the Russian letter that makes sound s. So съем. So imagine if it doesn't have that sign, it would sound сем. So even though it doesn't have the sound by itself, it makes you kind of a pause. So you say с ем. And that's almost like you make it two words. S and then ем. That's probably the best way to explain it. Again, pretty rare, not used that much, or I guess not used enough to really worry about it. The next one, that's the one. It's probably the hardest letter for English speakers. The sound is just very hard to pronounce, and unfortunately, because it's a vowel, you can't really even tell someone to, make your lips like this, or, touch your tongue to the roof of your mouth. It's a vowel, so you just kind of make it. The closest sound would be in hit, so the in hit. But if I say it by itself, it's the sound I know, very hard. So the example that I have is мыло, which means soap. So for example, it's pretty close to E. So if you say Mila, it's close. So if you maybe can kind of figure out how to say something between the E and I, so Mila. Takes practice. Again, you would be understood if you say it wrong. But it is actually a pretty common vowel, so it is used a lot. And the last one is, so we had the hard sign, and this is a soft sign. So this one makes other letters softer. It's not very clear what that means to someone who doesn't really know soft sounds versus hard sounds, but again, another example. So mel is the one that I have here, and you can see there's an L and that last soft sign. So if we didn't have that sign, we actually had it as an example, and I used it on purpose. It was mel. Mel was chalk. So just listen carefully, and hopefully you'll hear at least a little bit of a difference. So mel versus mel. So mel kind of just drops. It's a hard L. Mel. And then mel makes it a little bit of a softer L. Again, hard one, but it's same thing. It takes practice, and if you come across the words with that soft sign and you don't really know how to read them correctly, but if you read it as a hard consonant, it would still be understood by Russian speakers. So just takes practice, some little training for the ears, and some people actually get it pretty quickly. So that is it. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you now realize it really wasn't as bad as you thought, and now you can read Russian a little bit better. So like even in my Russian lessons, I don't have to approximate the words, and of course also knowing how to spell the words correctly will help you look them up in the dictionary as well. Okay? So the last slide is going to be the alphabet in the proper order. Before it was just broken down in different categories, and this is the correct order of the letters. So A, B, V, G, D, Е, Ё, Ж, З, И краткое, К, Л, М, Н, О, П, Р, С, Т, У, Ф, Х, Ц, Ч, Ш, Щ, твердый знак, И, мягкий знак, Ю, Я.